Hi guys, welcome to a video, and in today's video I'm just going to be reviewing Black Mirror's Hotel Reverie. If you're not familiar with this episode of Black Mirror, it's centered around a Hollywood A-list actor, Brandy Friday, who is thrown into an unusually immersive high-tech remake of a vintage romantic movie, where she's got to stick to the script if she ever wants to make it back home. I've seen so many polarizing opinions about this episode, and now that I finally watched it, I understand why. This is an interesting one, and I too now have some opinions. And yes, I'm fully prepared for people trying to fight me for them down in the comments. Just be warned, I may have the body of a fragile Victorian child with tuberculosis, but I have the heart and stomach of a butch lesbian about to throw a brick at a police officer at the Stonewall Uprising. 1969, baby. Cool. Let's get into it. First of all, I think the concept for this episode is fascinating. The idea of being immersed in an older film and being able to physically interact with the environment and AI constructs of the deceased is a really interesting one that opens up a lot of conversations and food for thought about our relationship with technology. And the suggestion that these AI constructs of the deceased are capable of agency or contain a level of human essence provokes thought and discussion about how human consciousness intersects with technology and the ethics of artificial intelligence. Where does the machine end and the mind begin? It's frightening as well as fascinating, but that's very Black Mirror. Another engaging aspect of this episode is Emma Corrin's performance. She completely embodied the role of Clara/Dorothy and had the mannerisms and accent of a 1940s British film star down to a T, to the point where she really could have been an actress from that time. Corin also has this incredible depth and is able to convey so much through her emotional acting alone. You can really see and feel Dorothy's despair, confusion, longing, and suffocation without Corin saying a single word. It's also a bonus that she isn't afraid to connect with her scene partners. I felt as though her vulnerability and openness carried a lot of the romantic scenes between Dorothy and Brandy in this episode. I mean, Corin completely committed to this role 1000%, and I was mesmerized every single time she was on screen. I honestly think this episode is worth watching for her performance alone. In my opinion, Dorothy's data pool flashbacks and the Claire de Lune montage were probably the highlights of this episode. Again, Corin conveyed so much about Dorothy's character, inner world and predicament through emotional acting alone. It was both beautiful and heartbreaking to watch, and the Claire de Lune montage was equally as touching and thoughtfully edited and paced in such a way that succinctly and artfully encapsulated the tender, blossoming romance between Dorothy and Brandy. Another aspect of this episode that's interesting is that Dorothy's predicament as a closeted actress echoes the very real pain and tragedy of so many closeted Sapphic actresses of days gone by. Feel free to check out this video if you'd like to know more about that. And I think that echo of the truth made a lot of her scenes and story particularly poignant. It's also an intriguing twist that Dorothy was able to live her truth as a gay woman through a fake reality, and the exploration of the many versions of her character was particularly layered due to the fact that she was an actress. So there's Dorothy herself, and then there's the version of her that the press created and the public consumed. There's the captured image of her that's recreated as an AI construct, and then there's the essence of the real her that's fused with that. And all of this provokes thought around who we are as people and how that's distorted and separated through media, technology, and societal expectations and perceptions. In a lot of ways, Dorothy's career in having her image captured and sold warped her real self into something she wasn't, and the suggestion that some of her real life essence fused with Clara's AI construct reminds me of the quote, "Don't be photographed too much or you'll lose your soul," which is a very haunting saying that ties into the concept that being captured by technology takes something from us. I mean, like I said, the themes in this episode are really interesting. I also appreciated the way Brandy and Dorothy's romance unfolded in such a natural manner. There wasn't this big focus on sexuality or coming out. It was refreshing that it was just a story about two people falling in love. There's a really beautiful line where Clara tells Brandy that she's never met someone so differently alive. And of course, it it connects to the fact that Dorothy is an AI construct of the deceased and Brandy is truly alive, but also to the fact that Brandy is so openly herself and free from a lot of the societal restraints that kept Dorothy in a state of mental and emotional repression. I also loved the ending and thought Brandy connecting with Dorothy through technology was a significant and meaningful way to wrap the episode up, especially considering that's how their romance began, and since phones symbolise connection and technological advancement in communication, keeping us in touch with one another no matter the distance, this visual meaningfully ties into the core themes of this episode. I mean, it's a little bittersweet, but I liked it. I also think it's interesting to think about the consequences of communicating with AI constructs of the deceased in such a way. Is it something that could be therapeutic and comforting, or could it be unhealthy in that it hinders people from accepting the truth of death and moving on? Does it encourage delusions and disconnection from reality? Interestingly, a lot of what's in this episode is relevant to our current day relationship with technology and artificial intelligence, but I don't want to get too off topic. Now, moving on to what didn't work as well for me this episode. And let's start with Issa Ray. So it's worth noting, and I'm sure most of you already know this, that Brandy acting and feeling so awkward throughout most of this episode was intentional. In an interview with the Radio Times, Charlie Brooker explained the inspirations behind and origins of Hotel Reverie, where he said, "There was one I wanted to do, a kind of horror story about somebody restoring old horror movie footage, who then realizes they can communicate with people in the footage. That was an idea I'd had, and I couldn't quite work out what the story was. And then I also wanted to do a story about an actor, like someone who's sort of unsuitable, who gets thrown into the role of James Bond in a high-tech remake of an old Bond movie. These were two separate ideas I was toying with for quite a long time. And then I think what happened is I watched Brief Encounter, which I'd never seen before, and I thought, oh yes, a vintage romance, that would be fun." So this explains a lot of why Brandy feels like such a fish out of water in the film she's been cast for. And rewatching the episode with the knowledge that it's purposeful recontextualizes a lot of her scenes and explains some of Ray's acting choices. The whole point of Brandy is that she's not suitable for the role of Alex Palmer. However, even taking all of that into consideration, personally, I don't think that Issa Ray was the best choice for this role. Not because she's a bad actor, more because to me her particular style of acting didn't work all that well for the role, which I felt required more emotional vulnerability and versatility than she had to give. I also feel as though she was lacking the type of charisma that would have made the fish out of water and flailing aspect more endearing and humorous than awkward. And where Corin was fully immersed in her character and became Dorothy, it felt to me as though Ray was acting out the character of Brandy instead of embodying her, which hindered my immersion in the story. And whilst Ray and Corin both committed to the physical intimacy, I felt as though Corin was carrying a lot of the emotional intimacy and chemistry between them. It seemed to me that Ray was perhaps a little reserved or not as tuned in some of their scenes together, and that's not ideal when you're trying to portray this all-consuming grand romance. To be clear, this is not the fault of Issa Ray. She turned up and did the job she was supposed to do. It's very much on the casting people, and I also feel as though it's on the direction and in particular some of the writing. I just don't know that Brooker's idea of purposefully dropping an actor into an iconic role which they're not suited for worked all that well against the other choices that he made for this episode. For example, we're introduced to Brandy Friday as a talented A-list actor who is keen to break out of the reductive boxes she's been placed in, and she is shown putting in the time and effort with researching for the role of Alex Palmer. So even taking the fact that she was caught off guard by being suddenly immersed into this artificial world into consideration, it didn't really make any sense that she would turn up to this job and forget her lines, not know how to act, or fumble her scenes in the way that she did. Also, a black woman playing a role initially created for a white man within the context of the current socio-cultural climate has very different implications themes and messaging to Brooker's initial concept of having someone unfit playing James Bond. The latter seems like a fun and silly idea, whereas having a black actress striving to break out of the reductive roles she's been boxed into, and finally being given that opportunity only to fumble it, doesn't feel very fun and silly, it feels awkward, and as though it contains certain messaging around diversity casting. In fact, I initially assumed that Brooker was making commentary on diversity casting in remakes and reboots with this episode, but after reading his interviews, I don't get the impression that that was his intention. It seems as though it was truly about just placing an actor in a role which they weren't suited for. But even still, surely he must have known the implications and connotations attached to what he was writing. It feels confusing that all we're told as an audience is that Kimmy and Judith go from wanting Ryan Gosling or Reynolds for the role of Alex Palmer to enthusiastically taking up Brandy Friday for the role, with no further discussion on how it will impact the feel of the story, the marketing potential, or anything else. It's implied Brandy is hired purely because of her A-list status, and Kimmy says it's a brilliant idea to cast her in the role of Alex, but that's never expanded upon. So it feels as though maybe there's messaging in there about studios or companies prioritizing publicity potential above the consideration of everything else, and perhaps commentary about remakes being thoughtless money grabs. But it's not 100% clear, and this makes the writing around this aspect of the story feel vague and contrived for the sake of the plot, or for the sake of melding different story ideas together. It would have made more sense if the episode was rewritten so that Brandy was a struggling actor who ended up in that role some other way, rather than establishing her to the audience as a talented, capable A-list actor who for some reason didn't know how to act. Because this just sets Issa Ray up to take the fall for bad acting when really the source of the issue is the bad writing. Stylistically, I understand Brandy was a modern addition to a vintage film, and the way she was styled was supposed to represent that, but I feel as though they should have either committed to a modern day look entirely, or styled her in a way which was appropriate for the 1940s, because the mishmash of styles just looked awkward and felt like lazy visual storytelling. It was giving, oh, she looks this way because she's half in this old world, and yet still half in the modern day world as well. You see? And Issa Ray is a stunningly beautiful woman. I mean, just look at these pictures. They could have done so much more with her look. And are these nails in a Sapphic romance? Oh my god, why? And these details in the costuming, in combination with parts of the writing feeling half-baked, suggest a level of carelessness in the creative process and planning for this episode, which I feel hindered it from reaching its full potential. As most of you already know, this is Black Mirror's second lesbian-centric episode, and according to Google AI, it's considered as a spiritual successor to San Junipero. And on the one hand, I very much feel as though Hotel Reverie is its own episode. From what Charlie Brooker has said, it doesn't sound as though it was initially inspired by San Junipero at all. But because both episodes deal with immersive technology, life after death, and have interracial lesbian romances, do you wonder if the success of San Junipero did indeed influence certain choices in Hotel Reverie. Either way, comparing the two episodes, not that you need to, I just want to, I think the concept for Hotel Reverie is a lot cooler than the concept for San Junipero. However, the writing quality, pacing, structure, and chemistry between the two leads in San Junipero was much better overall, which made for a more cohesively good episode. Whereas I feel that Hotel Reverie is an episode where parts of it are good. Overall, I think the concept for Hotel Reverie is an incredibly interesting and intriguing one. Emma Corin delivered a mesmeric performance, and there were some really heartfelt and meaningful moments in this episode, all of which I enjoyed. However, despite all of this, I don't feel like the episode reached its full potential due to the half-baked writing in certain places, in combination with Issa Ray not quite delivering what was needed for the role, which is a shame because I truly believe that if better care had been taken with the writing and casting, this episode could have been phenomenal. I mean, even better than San Junipero. Okay guys, if you've seen Hotel Reverie, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!